Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. And today we're having a really interesting proofread where we're talking to Stephanie, who is our wonderful sale lady, as it says, and our wonderful friend. And I see that Ember and their viewers just decided to drop in and raid, which thank you so much, Ember, and thank you so much, people, for tuning in. Stephanie, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you? Are
You're
you
well.
awake yet?
I am barely awake, but trust me, that will change as it goes along. You know,
Okay.
I definitely will wake up. I'm semi-conscious. That's enough sometimes. That's
All right.
definitely wait till I have my coffee and then ask again. That's a good idea.
Okay. I'll give you time to warm up, as it were.
No, I'm good. I jest. I really am good. I'm good.
It's 9 o'clock in the evening where I am right now, and it's probably
It's 10 in the morning, but I did get
10
up
in the
late.
morning.
So yeah,
Okay.
I did get up very late. So usually I'll be up by about at the max 8 o'clock, but I sort of got up at 9 today. I've been up for an hour or so, so it's not too bad.
I'm getting ready to help Purple Rhymes with Orange out with her Christmas stream, which is coming up.
Mm. Yeah, and that's on
So
Christmas,
I'm
isn't it?
becoming more conscious of the time on the other side of the date line, which
Mm.
has always been a struggle.
Well, somebody said to me, we should have a universal date kind of thing. We should have a universal time, and people just adjust around that. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I go by UTC. I think it's
Yeah,
probably the easiest thing to do. You know, it's a plus or minus, and then you can figure it out. All you got to do is remember where the date line is when it's
right.
Monday or Tuesday. So
Hmm.
for you, it's Tuesday morning. For me, it's Monday evening,
Sure,
and
sure.
and at this point in time, it is it's Tuesday morning in London as well. So there you go.
So is do you do long distance sailing? Is that because of long distance sailing, or is that just sort of something that you
A bit.
acclimatize
I mean,
to?
that's
Right.
why I adapted to it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it
Because
doesn't
I'd
really
imagine.
matter. Local time is local time. Local time matters to
Hmm.
you. Uh, I know that time being relative as a concept in physics and as a concept in reality is a little bit weird, but I think we all sort of grasped the notion as soon as people started to travel at
Sure.
speeds that would get them to where
Mm,
the sun doesn't come up at the same
yeah.
time.
So what's your and actually we really should introduce you, and do you think you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, what your channel is all about, and sort of just give people an overview of who you are to get to sort of know you and sort of know what you're all about.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't want to do the entire biography, but I'm
No, no, I
but well, I could. I don't mind. It's like many people on YouTube, I'm a freaking egotist. I can go on and on about myself and till the cows come home. But no, I'm Stephanie Helms. I'm a sailor and a sailmaker. I've been doing the sailmaking bit since I was in my mid 20s, so better part of 45 years or so. Or no, yeah, that's about right. Just had my 70th birthday, so I'm 69 years. How many days is it now? Since the 30th of November. Old, and I've been at that for a long time. Actually, my uh, sailing professionally started around the same time as when I got into making sails. I had sailed a little bit when I was small, uh, but I hadn't really been attracted to the sport until I started making the stuff and said, geez, if I'm going to be sewing these things together, it'd be kind of neat to know how they work. And so I got into doing that, and I've been doing that as a way of keeping the kettle boiling for a long time. It's physical work. It's hard work. Sailboat racing is an incredibly interesting and complicated game. It's hard to do well. But I managed to do an okay job at it so that people still want me to go sailing with them after all these years. It's something that is an interesting admixture. The game is really, really interesting. The activity is also interesting. If you want to stay alive, it's a good idea to not tip the boat over too much. or hit a rock.
I've heard in the past that a lot of sailors didn't know how to swim. How's your swimming?
A lot of sailors don't know how to swim, which is really freaky. Right. I'm not a very strong swimmer, but
right. I guess we do have
adds encouragement to A, wearing a personal flotation device, and B, staying on the boat if you possibly can.
There's a lot of motivation there, right?
Yeah, well, as you can see, the boats behind me here, those are Etchells. I sail those boats frequently, competitively. Qualified for the Worlds next year in Marblehead, I think it is. I think the Worlds are in Marblehead, but maybe that's the North Americans. I can't remember. But these boats are a 3 or 4 person boat, and as you can see, there are no lifelines, so there's nothing to hang on to. If you start going, you're in the drink, and it's particularly scary up. They're not very wide. I think the maximum beam is something like, gosh, from side to side on Etchells. Side to side on Etchells is maybe 5.5 feet. So it's stay on the boat. They also like to tip a lot.
That's 3 meters, I think. I'm so sorry. I only think in meters for some reason. 5. I guess. Yeah, that's wow. Okay. And so
I can understand why you only think in meters. What's 5.5 feet? It's like
500 feet in meters.
5.5 feet, not 500. 5.5 feet in meters is about,
so that's like just over
1.75 meters.
Just over. Okay, fantastic.
Not quite 2.
I do notice that the picture, A, the people don't seem to be wearing life vests, and B, the sails aren't made of canvas. Do you work with that kind of material, that synthetic material? Do you do just canvas kind of thing?
No, I work. Most sails are not made from cotton canvas, for a couple of reasons. One is that cotton canvas is very heavy, and also very stretchy. Both things that don't really help a boat perform very well, because the idea is the wind is the motive force to make the boat move, and if the sail is stretching, the energy that it's getting is turned to heat rather than kinetic energy. So it's the performance is degraded. And so lighter, stronger fabrics like woven dacrons were introduced as soon as they became available. Woven polyesters were introduced, and more high performance, more high performance sails, and sails, particularly high performance long distance sails, are made out of very, very high tenacity fibers like carbon fiber and Technora, and that sort of thing. Light and strong.
Is there anything on the boat that they still used in tall ships era? Anything made of the same material? Have we modernized everything on the boat?
Well, even the ships on the sails on tall ships these days are also made out of synthetics. For the most part, there are some the craft of what you have to do to build a sail out of canvas is rather different than what you do to build a sail out of some of these more modern fibers. So the technology's changed a great deal, but
Right.
but it's still the same. It's called the ancient interface for a reason. It's the center of effort in the sail plan and the center of lateral resistance in what's underwater that lets the boat sail. So anyway,
Okay.
this is one of the things I do talk. My channel's pretty polyglot. I talk about sailing, and
Yeah. Well,
I have actually sung sea shanties on the channel.
oh, nice. I think the
Yeah.
only sea shanty that really grabbed me was that one that the guy did with the deep voice. What was it? There once wasn't it? Um, Weatherman. Sorry, I had to get to the chorus to remember what it was called. I love that sea shanty. It's an amazing one. It was originally a TikTok thing where people added to it, and it was really, really good. If you haven't heard it, it's actually really good. Uh, so Um, yeah, and I see you do a lot of different stuff, but I wanted to say happy belated birthday. I didn't even know it was your birthday. I would have. Did you have a celebration on your channel? Did I miss
Yeah,
that?
I
What
thought you
happened?
came on my stream. Weren't you on my
Did
stream?
I? Have
I
I
think you
have I
did.
totally forgotten? Maybe
Yeah, I
I
think you
could have.
did show up.
Yeah,
I'll have to go
I may
review
have.
that.
Well,
I think you did.
my memory might be going. Look, I remember May as other night, which great to see Maya turn another one. But yeah, actually, now that you mentioned, I think I actually did. But happy birthday
Yeah,
again. Why not?
you had that. You actually brought uh, an Australian ditty that was performed there. That some band, I forget exactly what it was. I
Oh,
remember
okay.
that distinctly because I saw this copyright thing, and it was the band guy that he brought on,
Oh,
but of
oh,
course it
I'm
didn't
so
go.
sorry. Yeah, that
Oh no, it
sucks.
doesn't.
I'm
No,
so
no, no,
sorry.
no. It's just yeah, it's where YouTube goes copyright, and then they goes,
Mm.
this user lets their stuff be used on YouTube. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you have
Okay,
to.
that's what I thought.
Impact
Yeah.
zero. But thanks for letting me know.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, yeah. That's not too bad. So, and you also do a lot of sort of political speech for trans rights and things like that. And this is sort of more the thing that I wanted you to be able to speak about and speak freely and speak in a space where you're not going to be attacked or sort of hassled for it. Um, I try as hard as possible to support the trans community. And well, really all of the LGBTQI plus community, really, as much as possible. Did you just vanish? Wow,
I
that was
did,
amazing.
I
Oh,
did,
okay.
but I came back.
Wow. Okay. So that was amazing. I thought you just went, oh, I don't want to talk about it. Well, we can talk about
No, no,
whatever
no,
you
no,
want,
no, no,
really.
no.
I
I obviously I do. It's
Yeah,
I'm not shy about it. It's kind of an odd thing. I can sort of tell you. I get to that. Um,
sure.
uh, I've always been I've been part of a family that was raised in an activist tradition. All right,
Mhm.
rooted in the social gospel of the Methodist Church. Okay. I'm an atheist, but
Right.
the
So how do the
there is a
Methodists
strain of
differ?
Christianity that uh, was deeply involved in, well, abolition.
Mm,
Later on, immigrants' rights at the turn of the century in the United States, for example,
right. Yeah.
uh, 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 taking care of the urban poor during the Gilded Age. My grandfather was also a Methodist pastor, as was my dad, and he was deeply involved in that. and anti-fascism stuff. My dad was involved in that as he was going through seminary in the 30s. And my sister, who is 15 years older than I, was involved in the struggle for desegregation in the American South. So I've always been involved in, and of my struggle, of course, was decolonization and work against the Vietnam War in the late 60s when I was teenager going in. So I've always there's always been a bit of a strain of activism in, what do you do when you're not doing stuff to make money? You try to do it with an eye towards social justice. But as one ages, I was always conscious and always stayed involved in that sort of thing. But as a person who was very much aware of their being trans as a kid, in a time when that wasn't at all either. The phenomenon wasn't well appreciated and wasn't tolerated at all. When obviously gay was a
dirty word,
thing to be hidden, and a thing that would get you kicked out of polite society. That was another subtext of the stuff, but it was more of a personal struggle than it was a social struggle. I saw it as just something I had to deal with. So I had the experience of growing up as a self-aware trans kid, being taught that I was impossible. But it was a private struggle that I had to work through to get over a fair amount of self-loathing that took me basically 40 years from the time I said I'm a girl till the time I said no, I really am. Took me about 40 years.
And
so I started a transition in 1998, and went through that process, which was again, socially, it was a social thing, a private social thing, not a great deal of hemming and hawing, not a great deal of impact, surprisingly not a great deal of impact, a tremendous amount of upheaval and adjustment in my personal life and the way I interacted with people. But it really wasn't, I didn't really talk about it much except within the context of the personal adjustments and the stuff. I mean, I worked through, will anybody ever want me to sail with them again? Mm-hmm. And how's that gonna work? Is anybody how's my work gonna work out? How am I gonna deal with this with my family and that sort of thing? All right. Went through that process, but it really wasn't until about 20. Things started, the kettle started to boil in the political realm in about 2015 or so.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because there was more and more acceptance, more and more visibility. This is the double-edged sword of visibility.
Right.
In 2015, Time magazine, who was the woman that they put on?
I know.
Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine, and the headline was transgender tipping point, and the pushback was subtle, but it began then, and coincidentally at that time was when gay marriage was becoming more and more accepted and eventually became permitted in the United States.
And I remember Caitlyn Jenner was made a big sort of.
Well, Caitlyn came later, much later.
Yeah, a bit later. But so we've got sort of a well, we have people that acknowledge their trans identity, but sort of before that point, nobody really cared because they just didn't know about this section of community. Do you still think it's a good idea that there is that high level of visibility for the trans community, or is it something that you sort of think that is detrimental, or is it both?
Well, it's the double-edged sword again. I'm kind of getting to it. I mean, I had lived a life for, 98 to 2015 with going through the process of trying to convince people that, hey, it's, and almost, in fact, every single person that went running away when I came out eventually came back and said, that was silly of me.
Well,
will you sail with me?
Yes. That's an interesting question, because you sort of said polite society. I don't know whether that's maybe the culture in Australia where sailing I associate with rich people and very privileged people. So it's kind of, polite society kind of thing, right? So is sailing one of those areas that sort of would be more inclined to sort of be polite society and not accept you?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's I don't think it was an ideological thing. Throughout in my transition, it didn't become an ideological thing until much later, and it became so with determination from a side that had lost many of its battles.
Right.
They lost the segregation battle. They lost the gay discrimination battle, and what was left was the 0.2% of the population that experience their humanity really quite differently,
right,
around issues that are that most people don't think of, but when they do, touch them deeply, if you know what I mean. There's something about gender that I don't understand, but it's something that and not everyone does feel gender as deeply as, not everyone. There are plenty of non-binary people that just don't think of it that way, but there are a tremendous number of people that do. And a lot of them conflate gender talk and sexuality and a whole bunch of stuff. It's a whole complex of stuff. It's a tinderbox that's ripe for somebody lighting a match and throwing it in there and getting a whole bunch of people really upset.
Well, it seems to me that
particularly for someone in sports, that's an issue. It's bathrooms, it's sports, it's people like to think about, how does it work in the locker room? I mean, to this day, you get what's his nuts, Bill Maher. What's the first question he asked Riley Gaines? Well, tell me, how big is Leah Thomas's You
Yeah,
know
that's
what?
horrible. It's horrible.
See, that's the level at which the whole thing gets addressed. And it grabs people's attention, and it grabs so anyway, so right. I managed this transition.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, the Trump administration, pardon me, proposed a regulation, a change to the Federal Register that would, the Department of Health and Human Services would, upon adoption of this change in the code, would have defined sex and gender as immutable and defined at birth for the purposes of everything to do with health and human services. That's Medicare, that's Social Security, that's identity documents. That's the ultimate in identity politics.
Right. And you wonder,
you're going to legislate somebody's identity. You're going to put that down as a thing, and it hadn't been a thing. It hadn't been a thing. There were ways and means of addressing these issues, and I felt that, okay, this is where my own life and politics are going to clash. And I can't, as part of that 0.2% of the population, make sufficient impact on my own. I need to ask people to support me. So instead of being anonymously Sidra on Twitter at the time, or not talking about trans issues as Stephanie Helms on Facebook at the time, I made an appeal to my friends and I said, look, this is happening. I can't do anything about it. I hope you will. I mean, I will raise my voice, but I'm going to have to ask you to, to do the same along with me. And I thought I had a good chance of making that work because of the people's lives I touched throughout my transition. Just by being able to navigate a life such as it is over the course of 15 years, right? And to a certain extent, it did. So in 2018, I started to be more vocal about stuff on social media generally, and I really didn't do anything on YouTube until quite recently. But that's another story. But that's how it got there. So when it comes to get to, that's a long way of answering the question about the origin of the channel, what I do, et cetera, and so forth, the origins of activism and all of that stuff, but also to the visibility question. And I think the visibility question is a matter of personal decision. If you're strong enough, then fine. If you're not, if you feel yourself strong enough, then fine.
I always
be visible.
I always have reservations about thrusting someone into the spotlight. I do have trans friends that I wouldn't expect them to sort of rally the cause. But you seem to be very, very sort of, well, not happy that you have to do it, but you do seem confident in your ability to be part of that activism sphere. how do you usually feel? Do you, like I want to get a sense of whether you feel very confident and comfortable, or are there times where you feel threatened and that you do want to. I could totally understand if you want to hide away from this absolute nonsense that's happening. Um, are there times when you do feel like, oh, putting myself in the spotlight was a huge mistake? Does that ever cross your mind?
Um, Not really, because I don't know. I think that if people like me uh, aren't there to be visible, I mean, I have within my realm, okay, within the realm of where I make my living in sewing shit up for uh, you boys with your expensive toys, uh, and
I
and
don't have expensive toys, Steph.
and
Not this boy.
playing the game. Uh, I have a lot of friends, and a lot of
Mm,
very good friends
yeah.
who, and there are a lot of people who don't know. Now, here's I can I give a short anecdote. I've told this before. I'm a uh, I'm aside from actually doing it, aside from being an actual athlete, um, registered with World Sailing as a professional sailor, blah 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 blah. I'm also a race official, so I have certifications for as a regional race officer and this, that, and the other thing, and I run regattas and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I was doing 2 years ago. I was doing a match race event, and so this would be what 2021, and I was doing this match race event. Was it 21 or 22? Yeah, it was 2020. Yeah, it was
Which
2021, I
which
think.
race was it?
Pretty sure.
Which,
Anyway,
which
I
race
was
was
just
it?
trying to. I had just, you know how
Okay.
stuff goes. But
Yeah, yeah.
so we'd done this match race event, and a match race event has tons and tons of officials because you need to have. There were 8 teams, and so 8 boats. So you needed to have an umpire boat for each one of the boats for each one of the matches, and so it's like you needed to have 8 umpire teams, which is 16
A
yeah,
lot of
16
people. Yeah.
umpires, and it's kind of a big event,
Mm. Like
the
a
athletes,
regatta
and
kind
then
of
there's
thing.
the
Yeah.
officials and all of this stuff. So after the whole
Mhm.
thing, I was the principal race officer for the thing. I was running the event, and it's kind of fun, but it's also rather hectic. But
Yeah.
after the thing, the
Imagine.
chief umpire and the who's an IJ, international judge, and 2 national judges, we and I go out to dinner and just to sort of talk things over. And one of the national judges started. We'd had a lovely dinner talking about the event and all of this, and then for some reason or another, this person decided to start talking about the what's sailing going to do about trans people in the sport. And he starts going, I don't think they ought to be participating. There's trans women shouldn't be participating. It's going on and on and on. And
Did
I'm
they
sitting
know
there,
you were trans? I.
but one of the people sitting at the table knew. She's one of my oldest friends.
Mm,
She
mhm.
didn't know when we first met, and
Right.
somebody decided to be an asshole and say, yeah, no, she is trans to her, and she goes, what? So anyway, we're sitting there having this conversation, and I'm going, And I kept saying, well, I kept making the arguments, and then finally I said,
Mhm.
well, now let me ask you something. Have you ever met a trans person? And have you ever met a transgender person? And he said, no. And I said, well, you have now. Do you want to keep the conversation going, or do you want to
Right. Right. Why
do you
not
want to
talk
drop
to a
it?
trans person about Yeah, sure, absolutely. Did
So
she continue to talk
that's
to
the
you?
thing, Mark. I mean, I could
Right.
have sat there
Mm.
and not continue, or just sort of nodded and scraped,
Yeah.
and I could have been quiet, like the IJ guy who was the chief umpire, and this other guy didn't know I was trans throughout the conversation.
Mm.
But the it, but the impact that it's far easier to deal with the abstraction than it is to deal with the person.
Gotcha. So
If it's
you're
not
talking about sort of sort of the straw man concept you have in your mind, the sort of imaginary construct that they've built up about what a trans person is and what they do and who they are.
right.
Like if they're a trans woman, they're going to be big and brawny like a guy, kind of thing, like that sort of
Right.
um stereotype that they've put in their head. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's but it is the double-edged sword. You have to be, if
Mm.
for any trans person in that situation, if I were still in the closet, I would have walked away feeling awful. I
Right.
could have made the argument,
Do you think it's
but
okay though that some
it's
people
still a
don't feel
closet.
strong enough to do that? Like, do you think that's okay if some person just personally can't have that conversation? There are people that avoid conflict at the best of times, and that is a situation that potentially is full of conflict.
I, yeah, I mean, again, I said earlier, I think it's a personal decision, what
Yeah.
you do. I think that the,
Okay.
I think that the, I think that you're going to have a hard time not, uh, you're going to have a hard time. You have trans people are tremendously strong anyway. If you have, I think it requires a particular kind of strength to be able to say, okay, I'm going to have the argument from the position of advocacy as opposed to the position of shying away, because that's what is desired. I mean, what is desired is to let people not have to think about us, so that they can build that straw man, so that we don't have to think. It's like that's like, I don't want to be one of the good ones. I don't
Do
want
you
to
mean
be
like
in. I
sort
don't
of
want to be. I don't want trans people to be in something imaginary in people's minds. I want
right?
trans people to be accepted,
So you mean
and we can't be accepted if we can't be seen.
you're talking about dehumanization kind of thing, that you're this other thing, that isn't like other people kind of thing, like they're this. And I've always used this term, like sort of the othering of these marginalist groups, like the gay community and the trans community, and sort of. So um I think I understand what you mean. And yeah, and I guess that answers my question about visibility, that um, we I think it would be beneficial to be as visible as possible, and to have the idea and explain the idea that the trans community in reality has been around forever.
Well,
It has been a
trans
thing.
people have.
Yes. Well, I guess not the community, you're right. It's that the people themselves have, even way back in sort of ancient times. people that adhered to another gender isn't uncommon, and things like old Indian culture, they had a third gender for people that didn't fit the two, and there's all kinds of different cultures with people that behaved as part of the other gender.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I really think, I the othering goes to the construction of ideas of the trans community, which I don't think exists. I think there are people that speak out.
Yeah, okay.
I think that there are people that speak out and express themselves as trans people, but I believe that Caitlyn Jenner is no less a woman than I am.
Right, and I
But
disagree with a lot of the things
she
said,
will
yeah.
not defend.
Right.
She will not defend her personhood in the same way that I will. I mean, she's willing to surrender on other people's behalf. Her ability to be recognized as fully an adult human female.
Mm-hmm.
She'll surrender that. I won't. So I don't think that that's, I don't think that there are plenty of conservative trans women. There are plenty of conservative trans men. There are plenty of liberal trans men. There are plenty of, like, I don't really care too much trans people. Mm-hmm. So that to the degree that there's community is tricky, or that there's an ideology. I think that that's another thing that is constructed by people who simply don't want to see trans people as being equal. Who's got the ideology there? I mean, it is rather difficult to say that somebody who stands up and says I'm a human being has an ideology, as opposed to somebody who stands up and say, "Oh no, you're not."
Well, everybody's got an ideology of some sort, in my opinion. I think that sort of equality and treating people as humans, as you say, it's still an ideology. It's just, do you want to be part of the ideology that says that everybody is human and deserves rights and we should be valued, or whether you have the ideology which is sort of more hierarchical, which says that some people should have these rights and some people shouldn't, and that's really where the ideologies clash. And the sort of conservatives seem to want to have a gender sort of structure that seems more important to them than actual people, which is weird to me. They prioritize institutions over the people in them, which is kind of weird. But I think when you get down to it, it is ideology. It's just theirs is fundamentally flawed.
Well, you see, I don't see that dealing with an individual, very personal questions of identity necessitate an ideology.
That is true. Yeah, sure.
So, but a lot of people would make the argument that the treatment and of the providing the ways and means for a trans person to be fully human and comfortable in their skin is ideology.
Yeah, no, you do have a point. The treatment, yeah, I think that the
And it's not.
social.
It's not.
No,
It's
no, I
treatment.
get you. I get you. Well, the social response is definitely ideological, but you're right. The idea of personal identity isn't an ideology. I do agree with that. Yes. I think how we as a society react to a person that does declare themselves in contrast of this sort of traditional view of gender. I think that is, ideologically based, whether we accept it or we don't accept it. But you are right that the personal identification of yourself is an ideology. So it really comes down to whether your ideology accepts people for who they express themselves to be, or whether it says, hey, no, we're going to designate who and what you are without your consent. And that's where it conflicts with my humanism, because I don't think that you should have any labels thrust upon you that you didn't earn or you didn't choose yourself. You should be able to choose how you're seen in society unless you earn a different label. So I kind of do support that, yes, that you should be able to designate yourself as you wish. And so now the conversation with this person at the sailing club, how did it turn out? I'm really interested in, do people come around when you talk to them? And
Yes.
where do you find people coming around? Like what does that look like when they do come around? What's effective? How can we change? I'm essentially asking, how do we change people's minds?
Sometimes it's shock therapy, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just simply a matter of sometimes it's just simply a matter of endurance. But there are a couple of examples. Well, for example, the individual that I spoke to, we continued the conversation, and it's like, until I got to the point, it's like, okay, why don't you think about it? We'll talk later. We did talk later, and it was, hey, I really hadn't thought about it. I hadn't met you. I had never met a trans person. We had a good conversation. You were right to be. You're right to be. I can see how you would have been upset during the conversation.
Yeah.
And let's continue the conversation. So there's that. That's one thing. There was a fellow who, and it really kind of, kind of depends. There was one person who, after years and years and years since transitioning, AJ, I saw your question about real names and do I know what swatting is. I do know what swatting is.
Yeah, well, I was going to leave the questions after, but if you want to address anything,
no, I'll get to it. I'm sure the conversation will go on, but I just wanted to let AJ know I saw the comment, and I'll think about it. There was back on topic. There was this one guy who years and years and years would go, "Oh, hi, Dead Name. How are you doing, Dead Name? How are you? How is it going, sir? Wow. Thanks so much," and all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And then immediately
That's
followed by, "Oh, I'm
obnoxious.
sorry. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a while. I mean, I knew you was dead name for so long that I dead name. You know, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, geez, I'm so sorry." It's like, I was like, dude, stop tripping all over yourself and trying not to be an asshole while you're being an asshole.
So we've all seen that obnoxious behavior before.
So for a long time, I went, yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I know. I've known you for a while. But after a certain point, I said to this guy, I said, "Jeff, when did we first meet?" I think I met you in 1985. Right? And I transitioned in 1998. So that's like 13 years.
Yeah.
It's been 15 years now since I transitioned. How long do I have to be patient? And he never did that shit again.
Well, I mean,
and I did it publicly. I mean, I did it quite publicly. Because he did it, and I got pissed. I said,
no, I can understand why. After 15 years, I think that's enough of a chance where, and we've seen it all before. We've seen the people pretend that they've forgotten and pretend this, and they will use the incorrect pronouns, and they will use it in order to hurt somebody. And I think we've all seen it before, and I get that. I totally get that. Really, is that like? But did you sort of talk to him rationally, or did you actually just sort of call him out, kind of thing? How'd that go?
Well, on the final, you just stepped on my last nerve point. It was you stepped on my last nerve, so I called him out vocally. People are going, what? It's like, yeah, well, But it was fine, after there was a blow up, and then it was all better. It was all better, but he never did it again. And it's like better time, better season. I don't know. Again, how long do you have to wait?
Well, I think
how long do you have to? Because it happens publicly. That he wasn't doing it privately; he was doing it publicly, and that doesn't just affect me; it affects everyone around me. It affects my entire social situation with people that don't know I'm trans, that I don't want to talk about this bullshit to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I didn't. In real life, I don't want to talk about this crap. In social circumstances, oh well, here comes the tranny, which I hate to use the word, but that word got used. That word got used in front of the Freeport Town Council once.
In front of the town council. Yeah. So talk about that. Like, sort of. I mean, tranny usually is sort of transvestite, which isn't what you are. It's a complete misunderstanding and
it doesn't matter, Mark. I mean, I shouldn't have used the term because YouTube frowns on it and I frown on it. I think it's rude. It's ridiculous. It's designed to be inflammatory, and it is inflammatory. Yeah. And it was used politically. Again, in a situation. You know, the people who do that aren't doing it to be nice. They're doing it to be assholes. And that goes to the degree of effectiveness in being in the closet as opposed to being out. You know, and the context of the town council thing had to do with local town politics. The town wanted to give away land to a developer that had connections with local politicians and a group of citizens who I was working with to stop the transfer of the land into private hands. We won our battle, but I was at the forefront in that, and I couldn't exactly do that from behind the curtain. I mean, I suppose I could have, but I was more effective in being out there. And part of the opposition included people putting out a weekly 4-page folio-sized sheets of news stories with rather unflattering pictures or cartoons of me with my name, and it included racist imagery and sexist imagery and particularly vile racist imagery as well. To the point where I was getting actual threats. I went to the chief of police and he said, "Do you have a gun?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Well, I suggest you get one." I said,
"Isn't that your
Jerry,
job?"
Why? He said, "Well, you live in a particularly rural part of town, and if something ever happens, we can't get to you in time."
That's explaining why you can't do your job. I'm sorry. I'm hearing a lot of pain in that happening to you, Steph. I really am, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That's absolutely horrible. When you talk
that answers the question about why use your real name, because you can't do the work unless you do, if you're doing that kind of work. And do I know what swatting is? Yes, it's the consequence of doing that.
But not everybody's doing
why people do not? It's yes, I do understand why people do not, because.
But not everybody's doing that work.
Not everybody can. Yeah.
Well, but I don't think, as sort of AJ said, that it sort of represents cowardice, not giving you a real name. I have gone under a pseudonym before.
I don't think it represents cowardice. I do. I get. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
I wouldn't blame anybody for avoiding that kind of retribution to them. I admire that you can stand up and sort of say, "Hey, this is my name, come at me," but I wouldn't blame anybody for using an alternative name, as I don't for my fellow sort of atheists and other sort of, disenfranchised or disrepresented people, so underrepresented people. I don't. I understand that things might come their way they'd rather avoid, but that kind of level of vitriol and sort of putting a paper out with all this stuff in it, I can't even imagine what that's like. Yeah, I do apologize, Steph.
Oh, don't apologize. It's it's just don't apologize. It's not a thing. It's like um but it would have in that particular circumstance it wouldn't have been possible to win that fight without being as real as I possibly could be.
Well, you kind of referred to the real world as opposed to sort of YouTube and things. And um, I generally find that people behave better in the real world, kind of thing. Like people are really badly behaved on YouTube, but they don't do the same thing in my normal life. This might be a consequence of living in Australia as opposed to the US, and I really want to get into. Um, well, I'm really sorry to put it this way, but what's the US's problem here? Um, why? When we talk about, for instance, I want to really discuss when we talk about free speech, and it's a huge thing to America. It's in the Constitution, First Amendment, free speech, free speech, free speech. We don't really classify some of the rhetoric that comes out of America as free speech. We classify it as sort of hate speech, and it isn't allowed. If you're saying, hey, you know, uh, uh, Aboriginal people should be killed or something, that's hate speech. You can't say that. Um, and I'm wondering what's the US's position on it, and why is it that way? Have you
Well,
seen
I
something
mean,
that's
I obviously I'm not I'm not familiar with Australia. You you
okay?
we have uh I think Americans have a America and Americans go through phases of totalitarian entrenchment and re-entrenchment.
Mm, mm,
We're in a particularly the push towards totalitarian entrenchment is big right now, and there are lots of arguments about about free speech that where people seem to think that because they're criticized in some manner or fashion, they're being canceled, and they're not being allowed. They can't say whatever they want to say. Well, of course they can say whatever they want to say. People can say whatever they want to say until until it becomes a matter that's people are saying absolute garbage. That's getting people hurt
or harm.
I mean,
Yeah.
George Wallace stood in the fucking doorway of the University of Alabama saying segregation now, segregation today, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, he did that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Segregation now was real.
Yeah.
When I was 8 years old, there was segregation now in Florida.
And I believe they had to get the National Guard to come in to get those students into that school. They actually had to call out and
that was wrong, and that after that happened in 1960. When was that? 61, and Dwight David Eisenhower called out the National Guard to desegregate the schools in Arkansas.
And there's probably still some people that believe that should never have happened.
Yeah, American apartheid is it was something that was devoutly fought for.
So yeah, and so really, I guess if you can show that something's harmful, like a lot of the rhetoric, like about sort of, you know, against the trans community, um, is that still protected under the because you can't just go into a theater and shout fire and claim, well, that's my First Amendment right, kind of thing. Okay, so when something is demonstrably causing harm to others, or if you yell, "Hey, that guy stole my whatever, get him," and that causes somebody to be hurt. So I'm wondering why that allows people to use this rhetoric, which like has the definite potentiality to cause actual harm to people, and whether that's okay, whether that should be enshrined in still freedom of speech, or whether it needs to be changed, that you can't say, "Hey, get this community."
That paper that was published on the, it was privately distributed, let's put it this way. And it was an open secret as to who was doing that.
So this was a newsletter. This is the one that
Yeah.
sort of slurred you. It was a
And the
private
rest of us. I mean,
distribution.
there were
Okay,
anti-Italian slurs for the Italian guy who was, who was working in
okay,
the
that's
thing. There were
horrifying. Yeah, yeah,
there was all sorts of anti whatever. You pick your ethnicity, blah blah blah. That's
yeah,
how the KKK got involved with the whole thing. You know, that imagery got involved with the whole thing. And then there
yeah.
was the trans stuff that got, and that's like, oh yeah, well, blah blah blah. Well, all of that stuff, and you know, among some of the people that were getting slandered with this or tarred with this particular brush were actual members of the town council as well. So it was like, okay, so we have to happen to do this, and so I went to the town council, and it was getting distributed in the foyer of the town hall. And so I ever so politely walked into the town council and said, hey, can we have, here's a resolution, be it resolved, we're not going to distribute this stuff in the town hall.
Right.
The town hall said, we can't, we've consulted with our attorney. They went through all sorts of, we've consulted with the attorneys. They say it's a free speech issue. It's like, yeah. The pushback is to say, we're not going to let that kind of stuff be distributed in the town hall. You go ahead and distribute it out in the community all you like, but we're not going to do it here. So it's a question of the pushback is where you draw the line individually. You got to convince other people to draw the line somewhere. We're going to draw the line here. You got to convince people to write letters to the New York Times when they publish an article misrepresenting what happened in a gender clinic in St. Louis, Missouri, to say that is bogus, that is bullshit. You need to stop that bullshit. I mean, you got the speech needs to be coming out. That's why I keep saying over and over again, the speech that needs to be heard around trans issues needs to be coming from the medical community. It needs to be coming from the American Psychiatric Association, the American Medical Association, the American College of Pediatricians, all of these organizations that all 201, 25 plus major medical organizations in the United States and around the world disagree with the propaganda being preached in front of state legislatures that are passing these laws over and over again. And it needs to be in the public media. It can't just be at a legislative hearing. It needs to be in people's hearing, where people can see
Yeah,
it.
I agree. It's sometimes very hard for them to get visibility, though, and that's where the activism comes in. And I do agree with that. You've been sometimes very bombastic and very very loud over
This
the
is true.
course of thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that um, do you think that is the best way for some people, or do you think that's always the best way, or do you think that it requires sort of different styles for different people?
It is definitely different strokes for different folks, and it's not usually the best way. Sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not. It always has consequences. And sometimes sometimes the shit boils over.
Mhm.
And I know it did in one case. I apologize for that.
I know, I know.
It's probably more than one case.
Yeah, I don't really want to
It's
discuss.
never it always works. It again it that method is also a double-edged sword. Um it it, it gets it gets attention. Often it gets it often
You
quite
think it gets the
frequently it
wrong
gets
sort of attention?
quite frequently it gets attention to say for people to actually open their eyes and see, hey, this is some serious stuff. But you know, it's not always.
My worry is that people what what I'd like to see is people like you, Steph, being human and being people able to relate to you and your struggles. That's what I want to see, and I worry that sort of aggressive ways of doing it. Well, you're right. Like certainly does get attention. It gets a lot of, and I don't want to talk about any particular instance or anything like this. Um, but I want, I wonder if there's a way we can have the attention, but be able to say, hey, come and now talk to us. Be more inviting to say, because when you sort of talked about that person with, who they talked to you and then realized, hey, this is a person. I'm not just talking about some abstract concept that the media's told me about. This is a person in front of me, another human being who I'm talking with. And I wonder if there's sort of what the best way to get, and don't get me wrong, like some people absolutely deserve to be chewed out because they are absolutely awful. But how do we then get say the people that they're talking with into realize that, hey, if they want to have a conversation, they can have that conversation, and realize that it's a person in front of them. And so it's a hard question of um, how do we reject the idea while inviting the person, I guess is what I'm saying. Do you get what I mean? Like, is that a good idea, or is that something that um, we can't have that happening? There's no way to facilitate that.
Um,
I'm not sure. Titan
there's some
has linked
there's
something.
there's something about um, there's something about the moment.
Mhm.
And it depends on where you stand in the moment. It depends on what the context of the moment is. Um, and I want to read this excerpt from a letter from a Birmingham jail.
MLK.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I
Sure.
must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in his strive toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for, quote, a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. The whole thing needs to be read far more frequently than a few lines from the I Have a Dream speech. This is
Sure.
this is a defense of direct action in the face of injustice. And it was written in 1963.
Well, I don't think that sort of gets at what I'm asking, because I'm not asking to have a timetable or sort of people to stand aside and do nothing. I'm talking about how we interact with the people who have the construct in their head of what you were talking about earlier, about having that construct of this is the trans monster that's been presented to me that's going to steal my children and all that other, nonsense kind of thing. I'm not talking about sort of, stand aside and go, oh well, let's preserve that construct. What I'm saying is, what is the most efficient way we can break that construct? It seems to me like the best way we can break that construct is present to them somebody that doesn't fit it, somebody that isn't the monster that they've been told it is. And so my worry is that if we're too aggressive, we're too sort of, you're horrible, that they never have that broken. They never have that idea that they have changed. And that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think it's important in context, though, to recognize that in the struggle for integration in Birmingham, when, let's don't forget, 4 girls were killed in the bombing of a church in that struggle. In that struggle, people were fighting for the restoration of their rights, of rights that they had long been deprived of.
Right. Yeah.
Through the condition of slavery, through the imposition of Jim Crow, through American apartheid, years and years and years, from 1863 to 1963, 100 years there, going back to 1619, when the institution of chattel slavery based on race was first introduced into these colonies. That's a long history. And what has happened recently for trans folks has been a rollback of rights already possessed.
Yes.
The hallmark of this discussion, of this discourse, is not one, unlike the civil rights era, at least as regards trans folks, it's not one of demands from the minority to the majority. It's the demands of the minority to go back in the closet and stay silent the way you used to. That way we can continue to ignore you. It's rather a different dynamic going on here.
Well, sure, yeah. Yeah, no, I do understand.
And I think, but still the same dynamic works. So how does that work? When the demand is be quiet and become invisible, your advice is to be quiet and become invisible.
I never said be quiet, and I never said go invisible. What I'm talking about is an effective strategy to changing people's minds, because when you do have the majority of people on your side, it becomes a lot easier to do things. The majority of Australians support trans rights issues. That's the thing. Once you have the majority, it becomes a lot easier. And sort of so I think that the best thing the civil rights movement did is that they broke the idea of what a black person is and what they should be in that structure, and sort of showed that they were people as well to the people of America, that they were just like them. They had the same dreams, the same ambitions. They were just people. And so I think that, yeah,
No,
I mean, there were...
No, Mark, that's not what happened. What
Okay.
happened was they broke the power structure that kept them oppressed. And they did it by making the power structure look so odious that it had to collapse. And what they have fought for and what they continue to fight for throughout the American South is the reimposition of that. And in some measures, they've been successful. So in some senses, it is a clawback of rights gained. Those civil rights gained. That's where there's intersectionality between the trans people and civil rights, voting rights in the South, etc. They're trying to claw that back.
Yeah, and I really...
And the only way to break it is the same way we broke it before. The same way we broke it before. We make it so untenable for people to hold those positions that they can't hold office. And that's what happened most recently in Ohio. You know, there's been an overreach on the part of these forces. There's been an overreach, and they've been pretty soundly rejected recently at the ballot box. So I'm hopeful that the tide will turn. But we need to be focused. In my view, we need to be focused on the media. We need to be focused on the centers of power. We need to apply pressure to those places, and we need every voice to do it. And we need to take every opportunity to say it's critical that this happens, and we need to be attuned to where those pressure points are. And some of those pressure points are right here on YouTube, and some of the people we talk to right here on YouTube are the practitioners of the people that would have us go back. And we need to let people know that those people are those people if they're not willing to they're not willing to actually get the white sheets out and put them on, like Andrew Wilson did. I mean, that was a gift. That was a gift. That was an absolute gift. It exposed the absolute bankruptcy of the platform and of him personally.
Okay. Yeah, and I was very critical of that. It was absolutely disgusting. And there are a lot of these people out there, sure. Yeah. I do see what you mean. It's just um, I'm more worried that about their audience and when how they're going to sort of consolidate their audience, because that actual thing has done a lot for Wilson himself. He's sort of, now made a lot of content on it. He's got a lot more followers. He's consolidated all of his followers into sort of a very, very vocal amount of people behind him. And it makes me worry that that kind of thing. I worry that it's sort of just going to give them more fuel for the fire rather than less.
They
I
don't
mean, I
need
have people
anything
come into
more
my
than
channel.
the hate that they nurture. They don't need any more. They provide they bring their own fuel, because their fuel it lives in their imagination. They don't deal with real people. They don't really care to deal with real people. They just hate. They hate the
Well,
boogeymen that they create.
well, I mean, it's you could say that about the person at the sailing club that you talk to, kind of thing.
I'm never going to convince an Andrew Wilson to. I'm never
Well,
going to
no,
have
but
that
I'm not
conversation with that
talking
guy.
about him. I'm talking about his audience, because there will be a whole load of people on the spectrum, from people that are sort of just hateful bigots. And I'll always call them hateful bigots because that's what they are. And there'll be a whole bunch of people who just think trans is the scary monster that they've been told, that don't, understand. If they knew that there was a person and a human opposite them, they wouldn't have that same opinion. Just like the person at your sailing club. I think there's a wide variety of people out there. I'm not trying to convince the bigots and the real, horrible people of their positions. I'm trying to get people to understand that we're all people, and that trans people are scared and vulnerable and afraid, just like they feel scared and vulnerable, afraid. I think that empathy can be a really good tool in getting people to stop following these ideologies.
Well, I guess I wonder about your. I wonder about your appealing to the psychology of mobs. I mean, a mob wants a leader, and a leader needs a mob. And Andrew's creating a mob for himself. Now the mob is
Sure.
gonna follow that leader because the leader gives them what they want. That's why 30% of the populace is still of the United States populace is still throwing money at Donald Trump.
Mhm.
The only thing that's going to get him is to crush him as a political movement. And you're not going to crush them by convincing their followers that they're misguided. They will only become misguided when they don't have their toy to play with anymore.
Why don't they just find another toy?
I'm not. They may.
Why
I
don't they
mean,
just go to
yeah.
DeSantis?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. You can say that there was this interlude. There was an interlude, right, between the passage of the 1965 Civil Rights Act and the beginnings of tearing it down in the United States, which began basically around. Well, they started chipping away at it in the Nixon administration, but it became a full-time project with the guy who started his fucking presidential campaign in Philadelphia, fucking Mississippi, where 4 civil rights workers were fucking murdered. That would be Ronald Wilson Reagan. It's like, and he's the centrist saint. He's regarded as, oh well, he was the ideal uniter, the great uniter in the United States. That guy was as racist as crap, and he started this whole movement back to go back before Brown versus Board, back before the integration of the armed services, back before the New Deal. It's a long game, but there was this period of time when, quite famously, I won't quote the entire Lee Atwater speech. You can't say this on in a speech anymore, but you can say welfare Cadillacs.
Hmm.
You know, you can use the code words. Well, now we're at the stage where the
Right.
code words aren't, we don't even need to worry about the code words anymore because that current will always be there. So, yes, in a sense, won't they just find another thing? They will search and search and search and search and search to find another thing. And the smarter ones will play that long game. And those of us who don't want to see that long game succeed need to realize that next time, don't take your foot off the accelerator when it comes to social justice.
Okay. Hmm. No, that's fair. I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's just not my style. That's not how I do things. I generally have conversations with people that I disagree with and use rationality and reason. I can't see myself sort of taking that stance. Um, I'm I would more rather try to have a conversation with somebody and rationally look at um, how the sort of problems with what they're saying, rather than sort of just sort of um, you know vilifying them. I find when I vilify people, they just generally double down on what they believe. It works a lot better in my opinion, to convince them otherwise using sort of rationality and empathy. I've never seen somebody vilified and go, "Oh, well, I was wrong then." Usually the doubling down is what comes next.
Well, it's the tip of the spear thing that really kind of sharpens the perception, I guess, from the point of view of somebody in the trenches. It's
I have heard you use that phrase before, and I'm not sure exactly. Like, I get what you sort of mean, but could you sort of? It's a very warlike phrase, tip of the spear, and so what are we spearing exactly?
well, it's a very warlike thing. When a woman
Sure,
in
sure.
when a woman in Texas has to flee for her literal life because the state of Texas won't allow her to have an abortion that would save her
Yeah.
life at the expense of a life that cannot be saved, that's pretty warlike. And when trans people in Florida have to flee the state in order to receive gender affirming care.
Yes. But a spear is for attacking. It's for killing something, right? So
That's
what are we
correct. And
killing?
if you're at the tip of the spear,
Yes.
people say we have your back. A lot of
Okay.
people, when I first dropped all the anonymous shit and just basically said, y'all need to get in here and do something. And a lot of people would say, well, we have your back, we have your back. And I thought about the metaphor, and it's all very well and good to say have my back, but please do notice that my back is up against the wall and there's a firing squad there. So you need to pay attention to the firing squad.
Well, I think that when we're looking at like sort of aiming at sort of fascism and things, I totally understand what you're saying. When we're aiming at um, these um, these ideas that are really bad ideas, sort of like the denying human care to humans and sort of denying the things that you need in order to save lives. I totally understand that. I guess I'm worried that it seems like to me that the spear's directed at anybody with any conservative views, and that kind of worries me because it makes me concerned that it's going to pull in people who aren't necessarily against us to be against us. That they're going to see themselves under attack, and it worries me how they're going to react to that. That might not have sort of vehemently opposed you. It makes me worry that sort of thing of, well, we're going to kill you dead kind of thing, that kind of talk. It makes me worry. It sort of brings up things of violence, which I mean, I believe that and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not suggesting that that the answer is to answer hatred with hatred. I'm suggesting that the way to answer hatred is with standing up to it wherever it shows its ugly face.
Sure.
And if I show that face of hatred, I expect people will, and people have, and I take it seriously.
Yeah, I think that any like my channel, anti-trans, that kind of rhetoric is absolutely outlawed. I think we can, there absolutely should be a line in the sand that when you cross, you are just, told exactly what you are, which is a hateful bigot. I absolutely believe that. I'm more than aware, though, of the rhetoric of politics and the political rhetoric. You can pull people against you by sort of attacking everything around you, and I worry that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I suppose I've been way too mean to J.K. Rowling.
Well, I mean, J.K. Rowling.
I've been super mean to
statements.
what's her nuts, the woman on the Young Turks.
Do you think there's anyone you've been too mean to?
Yeah, I've been way too mean to poor Doc Dino.
Okay. But I mean, I'm more talking about the conservative side of things. Like, for instance, one of the things that I notice in sort of this culture war, if you want to call it that, is a using the term fascist to describe people. Now, maybe it's my autism, but fascism is a very specific thing. It's sort of a centralization of power. So I've heard it apply to, for instance, a libertarian. They call them a fascist. And it worries me because, while they may be a horrible person and have some really terrible ideas, don't get me wrong, that's not what they are. So do you think there's anybody on that side you've been too mean to?
I try to be more mean to the ideas than to the people. Okay. I don't know. I think I've been quite cordial to say with Pine Creek. Been very cordial with him.
That's true. Yeah, sure.
And I do think, and it's at some point I just don't, I don't want to name check the guy anymore than I have to. But the ideas are the things that need the pushback. They need when you encounter the ideas, they need pushback. Some of the most affirming and wonderful people and supportive people early in my transition were people with politics to the right of Attila the Hun.
Right. Yeah.
But because of the personal relationship, it didn't go that way. In the instance of the Department of Health and Human Services proposal in 2018, one of my longest friends was a gentleman with very deep connections to funding sources for the Republican National Committee. And I approached him directly, and he thought it was nonsense what was being proposed. And he did. I asked him, "Will you please write to these people, be in contact with them, and say this is a bad idea politically?"
Yes.
And he did.
And that's good. Yeah. I think that people don't write members enough.
The problem is, it is, you know, if you're trying to engage in political action, you need to actually act. You cannot just sit there and you know, there needs to be some passion behind it, like the fact that look at this, what this will do to your friend. This will take away her birth certificate. This will take away her driver's license. This will take away her passport. This will take away this. These are the actual factual things, the actual practical things. This regulation
and I think that people don't. I think that people don't write and contact their representative enough. People do feel powerless, but they don't make any effort to contact it. I'm a nuisance to my local obviously I can't do anything about America, but I'm a nuisance to my local representative. I contact them all the time, hassling them about anything that comes up, including trans issues, because it does actually carry weight. They do actually go, okay, well, if one person's contacted us, it's the equivalent of, you know, 500 people that wouldn't have contacted us but feel the same way. So, wow, we're at 1:40. I usually go for an hour and a half or so with these interviews. I know they can get a bit long, but we haven't had many questions. But I kind of want to sort of say to people, hey, just write your representative. Find out who your representative is and just write them and say, hey, this trans attacks I'm concerned about. That does more than you could imagine. Because for every person doing that, they'll say, hey, there's a whole bunch of people out there who feel the same way. Right? So even something as small as that, or email your representative. Like it's not a huge thing to do. And I strongly suggest it. I've done it before. Get ChatGPT to write the letter for you. It does a fine job.
They get ChatGPT to respond. Why not?
Yeah, well, yeah, but they still will note that people are writing them. So I think that even something that small, if you don't, you know, if you don't feel confident in sort of like jumping out there and going to rallies, which I've been to trans protests before. I think it's really important that people do get seen standing with them. Even though I have horrible social phobias and all kinds of, you know, social stuff, I still lurk in a corner somewhere in one of them and just be there because it's important to me. But if it's important to you, just write to somebody and say, hey, can we get more trans representation? Can we talk about this? Can we get these people heard? And part of the reason why I want to talk to you, Steph, and I do want to talk to some of my trans friends, they don't really feel comfortable standing up and saying, hey, I'm here, listen to me. They don't want that attention. And so, which I understand. I do understand. But I think we need to hear from the trans side a lot more than we do. And part of it is to break that idea that you're a nameless, faceless monster that's going to steal children and, you know, do all of this horrible stuff that they keep saying. Because, you know, what do you want from this thing? What do you want?
Well, I think that definitely writing is good. Speaking at your, you know, in local forums where if you're willing and comfortable to stand up in front of your neighbors and stand for things that are going on in like in America anyway, at your school board, when people talk about banning books from libraries and stuff like that, standing up and saying that's a really bad idea. That's good. Voting is absolutely critical.
Yep.
And in those interactions, be willing to call it out when you see it, and not let people cloak their bigotry in nifty arguments over metaphysics and philosophy, and examine what people do, not just what they say. I mean, I don't see any problem. I spent some time today reading some William James, on philosophy is great, metaphysics is great. It's good to have grounding in that, and it's good to question these things, and it's good to stand up, especially in debunking the foolishness that some people have and the unsoundness of their ideas. But the reason they are so forthright in defending those ideas has deeper resonance with their bigotries. And that's often something that goes unmentioned.
Do you think a lot of blame can be laid at the feet of religion, sort of setting up this idea of the immutable genders, and propagating these ideas before them? Do you think that has a lot of blame laid at its feet?
Well, yeah, I do think that the overall framework, particularly of those flavors of particularly Christianity and Western monotheism, that have those, well, mostly Christianity, with the emphasis on sin, with the emphasis on patriarchal structures, on the emphasis of all of these things, ain't helpful. It's not helpful as a foundational framework for a cultural tradition that we've all grown up with. I mean, it seems like we've all had to shed a number of those things and come to a critique of those things on our own, if we were raised in them, especially. There are other strains within the religion. You know, there's well, William James, that don't point in that in the directions of patriarchy, of misogyny, of transphobia, of racial bigotry, of all of these things. Religion was used on the side of abolition and on the side of slavery. So is it religion qua religion? I don't know. It's a framework of text and philosophy that can be used by people to build their own gods in their own images. And people have done it since that's how religions got invented. We have dueling gods. You know, we have the god of his truth is marching on, and the god of religion today, to tomorrow, and forever.
Yeah. And I do have to make a clarification, and Sven brings up a good point. Probably classical monotheism would be a better. You know, religions can vary. It's not like the Satanic Temple's doing anything that is particularly horrible. So yeah, I think you knew what I meant by religion is the main.
No, that's why I use the term.
Yeah.
Western
no, I gotcha. But Sven's right. Yeah, there's some religions that are, not as bad as the main one in there. No
I mean, I'd
problem.
have a hard time personally dealing with that because, as I said, my entire family is of that tradition, of a theological tradition that doesn't lend itself towards these rather ugly outlooks. I mean, I had the opportunity to preach at a South Portland Methodist church.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
and
they
my
seemed
nephew
very
preaches
welcoming.
every Sunday in three parishes in upstate New York, telling his congregation that his aunt's not a horrible bitch, which is nice. But
it's always well, and then there's the thing. Like, there's been some really supportive Christians even on YouTube. You have Rebecca Davies, I think it is, Bread of Life Rebecca, who was very supportive, and I sort of really I really want to uphold her as one of the people that have spoken out very vocally. And so,
I mean, she's crazy as a loon, but she's nice to LGBT. I mean, she's a flat earther. That's why I say she's crazy as a loon. But I actually thank Rebecca personally for taking that stance, and she did it at no small personal risk. She did it at no small personal risk.
That's right,
and that I respect.
Yes, and I really want to reach more out to that kind of people and sort of get them, because the Christians, you know, they will more. I mean, it's not like they won't listen to it, but they will more listen to a person who is a Christian rather than, you know, not, kind of thing. I know Rebecca's a young earther. I'm not sure about a flat earth though.
She's not a flat earther. If I said that, I misspoke.
Oh, okay, but I think she's a young earther. I do think so. And we've got a couple of things, and this might be a great point while in this lull. But yeah, I totally understand. Rebecca, I do think she's amazing. She sort of recently didn't want to talk to atheists, but that's okay. I totally understand that. That's fine. And I got a super sticker from Farron for $4.99. Thank you so much, Farron. If you can't see it on the thing, it is somebody ducking up in a cloud and saying hi. So big shout out to Farron, who's been a long time supporter and a supporter over at Amy's, and yeah, awesome person. And Robin has gifted one Mark Reid membership. Winner chicken dinner is big thing flying. Wayne got it. Well done. There you go. You hit the Wayne Meister. Yeah, Robin's amazing. They're such an amazing supporter. But that might be a good time to wrap it up. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave us with, Steph? Anything else that you want to say that you didn't get, you don't feel like you got to say?
No, I think this is a great chat, and I really want to thank you so much for making it possible. I'm glad we had the opportunity, and I hope we can do more of it. Maybe come on over to my channel at some point, and we can continue the talk. That goes for anybody. If you want to talk about these topics, it's open. And I'm open, and I don't always yell.
No, I know, and I know that, Steph, and I know that's why sort of I had you on. I know that you are passionate about this, and I do appreciate the passion. I do agree with you over the things that you're saying. I maybe disagree in how the methodology and the way that we go about approaching it. I have the way that I go about approaching things. You have the way you go about approaching things. And that might be different, and maybe both approaches are needed. I can't see myself chewing somebody out, you know, just going ballistic on them, because I don't do that. That's not in my sort of, you know, that's not in my repertoire. Maybe it's because I've trained myself not to blow up like that. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've sort of taught myself, hey, that's really bad to do. But maybe it does require different strategies, and we can disagree and we can still be after the same thing and still be doing the same thing and be supporting the same cause. Because if somebody says something anti-trans, they're out of my chat, they're out of my channel. I will not, you know, allow people, if they say it in front of me, I will say you're a bigot. You're 100% just a bigot, and you know, with these horrible views. Yeah, so I do try, and I hope you realize that I do support what you're doing, and sort of support the cause of the trans people who are. And as I said, write to your member. Just send off an email, just an email. As I said, just go to ChatGPT, write, get it to write a support for the trans email and send it off. Like just something small. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Steph. I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate that. Oh, Ember's just trolled me with another message. Thank you, Ember. I really appreciate it. Diversity and views and approaches is our strength. Yeah, sure. I'm not sure how. Yeah, no, I get you. I get you. Thank you so much, Ember. Really appreciate it. Ember's another member of the community and awesome. So thank you so much. And again, I want to say, and everybody,
Peter,
be kind.
Peter,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
AJ, nice to see you. AJ, if you want to talk anytime, reach out. Glad to talk.
Yeah, and I think sort of mending some of those people. Look, everybody gets passionate, gets angry, gets upset. Everybody has these feelings. Let's talk about it. Let's mend these sort of disagreements that we have, because the worst thing we can do is fight among ourselves when there's a much larger enemy out there. There's a horrible group of people trying to take away people's rights. Let's not forget that. Let's work together. We can disagree. We can still respect one another, and sort of, do our thing. We can do that. So I want to thank everybody. Don't forget to be kind to yourself above all. Treat yourself with kindness and understanding. Be kind to other people. And again, I want to thank Steph for coming on. Thank you for joining me. It's been a wonderful time. And much love to everybody. Goodbye, everybody, and take care.
Cheers, everyone.